A very warm welcome to everyone joining us this afternoon. It's really great to see all the artists coming together and staying strong despite the pandemic. First of all, we want to thank our four panelists for taking the time off your schedules and joining us on this very important conversation. So Sneha and I'm Malcolm. Sneha and I will be co-hosting and moderating today's session. We are representing Made in SG, an arts collective that engages local artists and arts-based companies to tell stories through video production and marketing. So although we're not able to shoot right now, we're very pleased to have this conversation today.
Yeah, so thank you, Malcolm. As introduced, I'm Sneha, and we have here today four panelists who have very kindly agreed to come on board this conversation, who also have very different backgrounds in terms of their artistry. And today we'll be discussing the process of creating from their own spaces amidst this pandemic. So firstly, we have Grace from Access Path Productions, an applied theatre company in Singapore, together with their associate artist, choreographer, as well as filmmaker, Ammar, aka Ameezy. Lee Lin, the founder of Bobbing Boy Films, as well as a director and teacher. And finally, we have Shou, a theater maker and an educator. So in this panel today, we also have a very good friend, Felicia, who is here with us today to assist us with live captioning so that this panel will be as accessible as possible. We will be exploring their process of creating from home, all these artists that we have today. And to all our viewers watching, do feel free to drop all your questions in our Facebook live stream comment section, as we will be also looking there throughout this conversation. So before we dive into the questions, why don't you all tell us a bit about yourselves? Maybe we can start from Ammar, and then Grace, and then Lee Lin, and then Shou.
Okay, so my name is Ammar, and I'm a choreographer, a dancer, and also like part of my passion is also doing filmmaking. So my work usually revolve around like how my perspective on being a disabled person in the modern world, and also how I like to combine both films and movement together. Because as a deaf person, I think I depend a lot on visual. So it's very important that the body language, the face expression is what I focus on, and how it can impact as a communication mode to others. Like, for example, let's say if everyone cannot hear, and how do we communicate through our body language? And these are things that I take on very seriously, and like it's been a very long research process for me. And also I like to shift my focus more on controversial things, like for example, uh, can deaf people or disability people have sex, because not much people will talk about this. They will try to perceive a disability person like uh, not being normal. So like, why are we not being normal? I think for me right now, being deaf is, I've taken it part as being normal. So yeah, so my works usually like focus on this kind of perspective.
Thank you so much, Ammar. Maybe now we can have Grace introduce yourself real quick.
So hi everybody, my name is Grace. I am the founder and creative development director at Access Path Productions. So we're into our third year of being a creative organization. We function like a social enterprise with really social justice at the core of our practice. So theater making, the arts is our medium to really communicate our message of how can we find new ways to work with people with atypical talents. And in this case, in the art sector, we do feel that, there needs more can be done. And I do believe that diversity is strength, and it is our differences that are the different talents that we bring to the table that will lift us all up collectively. So at Access Path, we do theatre productions, we do participatory drama workshops in both mainstream and non-mainstream contexts. And we have a lovely program a group of people who are disabled artists taking the charge, and we platform lived experiences of the disabled.
Thank you so much, Grace. Next, we have Leland. Just introduce yourself real quick. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Leland. How's the audio, Sneha? Is it okay?
Yeah, it sounds good on my side.
Okay, great. So yes, I'm a filmmaker, and my work is primarily narrative, and I'm interested in characters that who are kind of like quietly rebellious, who want to break free from a certain norm they feel that they've maybe been born into or imposed upon. So hard talking about your own work, you know. Yeah, I've been doing this for a while. I started out making short films, and I've made 2 long films. And of the past few years, I've been doing quite a fair bit of government commissions. But what's been cool is that I feel that I've been allowed to also infuse my style, which I feel is definitely more interest in character, I guess in irreverent characters. And so I've been really grateful for that. And on the side, I've been teaching for, I guess, almost 8 years now. I teach film-related studies, mostly directing and writing, which I really enjoy, and I feel that that's really enriched me as a filmmaker. So this whole circuit breaker period has been really interesting, and I look forward to talking to you guys about it more. So that's me in a nutshell. And yeah, my company is set up by myself and my husband Charles Lim, who's a visual artist. And yeah, and this is his man cave that I'm in right now, which I normally have a virtual background, but for some reason I couldn't get that up, so get that going. But anyway, yes, so that's me.
Thank you, Leland. Thanks for sharing. Next, we have Shou.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. So I think during these times it's always very bit difficult to describe what I do because there's just so many things happening. I am primarily a theater maker, and as Sneha has introduced, I also do teach. I also am involved in communications in that way. So in this period, I think in the circuit breaker, it's always been a period of where you kind of ask yourself, what is your core and what do you do? And I think I'm going to answer that question in introducing myself by saying that, yes, I am first and foremost a theater maker. So I act and I direct. I've done a couple of shows for SRT, Wild Rise, kind of been around for maybe too long. I started directing about 4 or 5 years ago, and the most recent thing I did was for the CIFA 2019 festival, and it was called Orestes by Iphigenia. It was a response to a Baroque opera by Handel. That was really fun. But yeah, that's essentially what I do. I act and I direct.
Thank you so much, Shou and Grace and Leland and Ammar. So I think we can dive right into the questions. So we all know that amidst the pandemic right now, we are on lockdown in Singapore. And for those who don't know, it's going to be lifted in phases. I say this because I think we have some international audience as well from the Facebook insights, I think. But yeah, I think we have talked a lot about what work from home looks like for a lot of different professions and how people's jobs are affected by that. And I think Malcolm and I wanted to just really narrow in on artists and how this has affected them and their artistic process. Because as creatives, we know that our environment is extremely important in the work we create. So I guess my first question to all of you is, how has the circuit breaker period really affected your artistic process? And how has that switch from working in your own creative space to working from now like a home environment? How has that affected you or your work, if that makes sense? We can go in the same order as we began. So Ammar, Grace, Leland, and then Shou.
All right. So actually, as a start, right, I've always been working from the comfort of my home, which kind of inspired me about space. So whether you're isolated from society or in any other form, I feel that each individual has created their own space within their space. And so far, it's very interesting for me to see how each of them react differently. And because as a disabled person, we are much or less often isolated away from the society. Like they will say, like, oh, being disabled, you are not uh, able to do certain things, and this somehow encave ourselves to a certain space. So when the COVID situation happened, I think somehow there was this cave around everyone, and everyone was isolated into their own space. And I think I would say that is actually a blessing in disguise, because like it has made people to be more aware of themselves, to be really understand like what happens when these things happen to everyone, you know, because so far it has been happening to the disabled community.
Thank you, Ammar. Maybe we can have Grace, your response as well.
Yeah, so to add on to that, because Ammar and I work together, and Ammar is one out of 6 of the associate artists at Access Path. And I must say that this is a very resilient bunch who's also very used to disruption, who's very used to rejection and segregation. So when these conditions happen, I see it like the pandemic is in a way an equalizer for all of us. And so they took it really well, you know, when jobs are being cancelled, when the programs that we conduct in schools, the disability awareness training that we do with our corporate partners, all that had to come to a standstill, you know, it immediately, with the mindset of, okay, these are the barriers, which are actually not unfamiliar to us. So immediately we went into how do we combat that? Yeah, because at Access Path, we operate from the bedrock of the social model of disability, and that's something that I urge all of you to go, you know, check that out, where we don't focus on a person's impairment. We don't place responsibility on a person's physicality or mental state, or so we don't look at impairment. It's about, okay, what are the current barriers now? So for a deaf person, it could be a lack of sign language interpretation. For a person using a wheelchair, it could be an inaccessible space. There are no ramps, there are no lifts in a certain space, and so forth. So we ask people, what are the barriers that you're facing right now? How can we help you overcome that? How can we find the resources to overcome this particular barrier, which in this case for the whole world, it's COVID-19. So just a little bit about myself. I work as a director, and well, sometimes at Access Pop, I end up producing, I end up, you know, writing grant applications, and I work from home quite a bit as well, just trying to gather the resources so that, you know, our artists can do the best work that they can. So I've directed my first Zoom monologue. So that was a recent project that Access Path worked on, and it was done entirely via Zoom. So that's a new experience, to direct a performer, and then the performer would record it and put the monologue online. It's a partnership with the Singapore Repertory Theatre. And also we have actually a piece of work, you know, because I talk about how ready we are, which is And Suddenly I Disappear. We live streamed the performance in 2018. It was a theatre performance about diversity and difference. And it's always there because we knew we wanted that work to travel to communities that could not access the theatre, like beyond the boundaries of Singapore. So in that case, you know, it's time for us to bring that work out again and share that with more people, because the purpose was to cross these barriers of segregation.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much, Grace. It's really interesting, like just understanding a bit more about how that pandemic has kind of affected Access Path and both you as a director in that lens. Thank you. Maybe we can move on to Lee Lin. Yeah, Lee Lin.
Yeah. So, like Ammar, I do work a lot from home. And so it's the only thing I really miss is I guess the rapport and the conversations that I like to have with my actors. And I consider myself a very actor-based director. So even when I'm developing independent projects, I do like to meet up with actors that I want to work with and talk to them. So like Grace, I also did my first Zoom short film that was also shot, completely on Zoom, and it was inspired because my nieces and I were trying to get ourselves in the Millennium Falcon on May 4th on Star Wars Day, and we spent an hour doing it when we should have been exercising or doing homework. But anyway, that kind of got me thinking about everyone finding this perfect Zoom background and creating these alternate realities for ourselves now that where so much of our practically all of our interactions outside of home are taking place on Zoom, right? Our work or social interactions. So that kind of got me thinking, and I made a short film which hopefully you guys will get to see in a little while. But yeah, so for me, it's also, I think everything that's been going on, I felt has shifted something inside as a person, as an artist. And I think moving forward, the projects that I'll be developing this year will really be reflecting on those shifts and, from observations and things that are going on. I must admit that I am quite happy to be on my own, and I don't know about you guys, but I am actually slightly socially introverted, which is, and I have some social anxiety, which is an odd thing to have as a teacher and as a director. And of course, I miss a few favorite people that I would love to see. Thankfully, I'm living with one of them, which is my husband. But that has allowed me to really think about my work. And like Grace said, because a lot of projects have been cancelled or put on hold, and suddenly you're faced with, okay, I don't have certain projects coming up, so yes, so it's time to start pitching. Okay, that's one. And then the second thing is also, what do I really want to talk about? How do I stay creative? And exactly the topic of our conversation today. And what kind of work do I want to make? How are my stories changed now? How has all the happenings of the past few months, which there have been a lot, and every day there are new happenings all over, and they reverberate to us in Singapore, and there are happenings going on in Singapore that should definitely reverberate to make us question things like Grace said and Ammar said, like diversity, inclusion. I think a lot of things that I think we need to reflect on. So I'm looking forward to that, and I feel that it's probably been two of the most fulfilling months of my life, with the exception of, again, like I said, not being able to have that face-to-face time with my actors for some of the things that I'm working on. But you adapt and you adjust. And like Grace, I made this Zoom short film, and somebody posted on Facebook recently about how it's so hard as a director and as actors trying to communicate on Zoom. And I would agree, because there's something alienating about it. So interestingly, the Zoom short film that I made, we had like 3 hour-long rehearsals for something that was just 2 minutes. And you realize that it takes some time to get over that, these things that we're facing now, these new challenges that we're facing on how to interact with our creative collaborators. But I also see it as a challenge. Like I think that now having these limits has also forced me to rethink about the projects that I want to do, and also knowing that on a film set, just like for you theatre practitioners, there's going to be a lot of restrictions, and there's also still a lot of uncertainty, because even as productions are going on, are happening right now, we don't know how things are going to be, how things are going to evolve. So it made me rethink moving forward how I want to produce the projects I want to do. And even when I was in the process of pitching for some projects, how I want to rethink my entire approach to them. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Leland. I think thanks for sharing that with us. I think a lot of us can resonate with a lot of things that you said. I particularly like the series of questions that you posed, and those are precisely the questions we want to be like discussing, because these are important questions that a lot of times are not talked about, because the community is relatively small compared to other communities. Thank you. Maybe Shou, can we have your thoughts?
I think I resonate with what everyone has said, and I think when I first started, the lockdown for me, or the kind of the falling apart of what I knew, started actually mid rehearsal for me, because I was rehearsing for Wild Rice's Grandmother Tongue, and we were supposed to start bumping into the theater, and we had just literally got off book. We were ready to go, and then we were called in for a Sunday morning rehearsal that was suddenly cancelled and pushed to a evening rehearsal, to a lunchtime rehearsal or afternoon rehearsal. And then we got there, we're like, okay, guess what? We're not doing a run. We are just going to go for ice cream, because unfortunately the new directive has such that we will not be able to have enough audiences in the space, and for it to be safe for the audiences and the actors. And then subsequently, the show that I was also rehearsing for halfway, because I was rehearsing for 2 shows then, at the Esplanade also had to be cancelled because it was a kids show. So imagine this two kind of weeks before the whole circuit breaker was enforced. I think theater artists were dealing with that, and trying to figure out how do we continue. And for me, that was a huge reckoning. I use that word because I think a lot of the times in my career and as my own journey as a person, I define myself by the amount of works that I do. Not sure if that's a good thing, and I quickly found out that really it's not a good thing. How many shows am I performing that year? Does it justify the time I'm spending in this career? Does this make me a theater artist? Does this make me an artist if I'm not producing anything? And so for that first 2 weeks, 3 weeks when circuit breaker actually started, I pretty much, like a lot of people, had to step back. I would say that I got depressed, and really considered, what does it mean if I can't do what I'm doing? Clearly from a very privileged space to be able to be doing theater, being able to have all these different projects going on, and for that to go away, all the years that I've worked to make it happen, suddenly you just feel, okay, well, now I'm kind of here in my room. Does it mean I still can do theater? So I kind of went into a bit of a quiet depression, where I wasn't really wanting to touch anything to do with art. There were all these people around me who were saying, oh, maybe you should do this, maybe you should do that. I was like, I'm really not looking for career advice at this point, because I'm more looking for wisdom to figure out how can I navigate this thing, because it's not just affecting artists, it's affecting the world, right? And I think for myself, as my own practice, I look at the human experience, and the human experience is not different from the artist experience, or I think it should not be. So I did also try my best to be productive. You don't know how many applications that I had meetings for, number of applications that I got rejected for. And then eventually I realized, and I stepped back and I said, actually, why are you doing all these things? What is the why are you answering a brief? And I think that was the first time I was really honest with myself during this entire period. Like, what does it mean for you, Chen, to be creative during this point? And then I realized that actually there's a very big difference between productivity and creativity. And if you ask me before the circuit breaker, I think I misunderstood what does it mean to be creative, to be a creative person, to be a creative professional. we are subject to the arts market. So productivity is often associated with something that you produce that has value to someone or a market or a governing body or someone that's going to give you a grant. And that's part and parcel of being a professional and having a career. But I think creativity is a individual experience. It is a solo discipline. It's only between you and your paper, you and your craft, you and the breath. And that really cannot be taken away. And that is really what can't be given value as well. And so for me, when I kind of made that distinction for myself, I was able to say, okay, creativity doesn't necessarily mean that I'm producing a monologue. I have great friends who this was their craft, right? They were really good at writing, so they're putting out amazing and funny parody videos. Shout out to my friend Dwayne Lau. Shout out to my friend Audrey Lowe, who did such great and entertaining like home filming. And I was like, maybe I should do that. No, Chen, you're not a very smart or funny writer. Most of the works that you do tend to be a bit dramatic. So maybe the comedy is not something that you should try to do during this time just for the sake of doing. So I had to keep myself in check and say, okay, don't compare yourself to what other people are doing because your creativity is going to be different. And so I just began just reading a lot. I began writing a lot more. I even started recording my own monologues just for myself. The first creative thing I did after that kind of depression, during the depression that I had, was trying to heal myself through what I knew was best, which was through bringing to life certain writing. So I literally just sat in with some of the favorite monologues that I had with my newly bought microphone that I had to buy because of the voiceover work that I had to do from home. And just sat there with the words and just let it be. And I don't intend to publish these things. I think that's the most, that's the thing about productivity porn, right? Like we do something and it's like, oh, it's because I want to put it out online, and there's place for that. And I had the opportunity actually to do something for SRT as well, the same project that Grace was doing, which was called the Corona Logs, and it is available on the Facebook to watch. And that was interesting because it was produced by a theater company and filmed also with Zoom. Or rehearsed with Zoom, as what Lilian had said. But ultimately, I had to film everything by myself. And I think for a theater actor, for a theater maker, when you cut off the presence and synchronicity of having someone in the room, it's really a very big change. And so it helped me understand, okay, what exactly do I love about the theater? What exactly does it mean to work with this new medium? And I think that's what's exciting about it, is to find something that I can actually feel authentically connected to and not feel like I have to produce something for the sake of producing.
Thank you very much for your thoughts, Shou-chan. That was really, really nice. Actually, we have Ivan Tan, who actually commented that, you know, you're looking great first and foremost, and he sighs that he missed grandmother's tongue. That's right. And he also says that Chronologues is amazing, and a big thanks to SRT. But speaking about the whole idea about productivity and creativity, that actually brings us all to the next question that I have. The next question I have for all of us is, you know, what are the few hidden gems or silver linings, if you will, that you have found when you are creating at home? So what are the small things that has surprised you? What is interesting? We've heard some stories about filmmaking over Zoom and also about theater making over Zoom, but maybe you could just go more into that. So Ammar, let's start with you.
All right. So I think I've come to a realization that you know, we all heard about frontline workers, and I believe that people who are in the art industry, I think we should consider ourselves as the second line front worker, because like I think we are the people who are trying to entertain people. We are putting up content. We are racing to make everyone feel, you know, stable in a way that there's something for everyone to see, to keep themselves occupied. So I think the fine line is when, you know, you shouldn't give like too much or less, like just nice, because like uh we all need to keep all the artists, you know, we have to be sustainable and our well-being also, because all of us are still human at the end of the day. And also I've seen a lot of theater companies giving out free plays, and it's really touching. And I often wonder why now. Like it could have been done maybe before. And I was thinking that this is a really thoughtful initiative from everyone, and it's nice to see how everyone is coming together just to support one another and also giving each other a shout out. So I find that really something that so alive, and it's not something that I expected, how this situation has affected each and everyone. Yeah, so I think it's really about I'm hoping that people don't take art for granted.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I guess coming from Access Path, we have always been in a situation that we wanted to create this, I wouldn't say it's non-mainstream. It's going against the mainstream where, of course, we want to create things. We want to create beautiful things. We want to, and we do believe that disability-led art is the new avant-garde. Atypical stories, authentic lived experiences, and different bodies on stage inhabiting. So honestly, Shou Chen and what you shared, I mean, I miss the theater so much. I miss that sense of occasion where people basically make the decision to travel to the theater, turn off their phones. That's a very big thing, and just sit there with you and connect with you. I mean, it's so great that all these things are online nowadays, but I find myself going to my phone, I feel like it does something to my attention span. So yeah, but coming back to this idea of Access Path being a space of co-learning. So what we've done is, I mean, I guess we were never really on the productivity train anyway. We're not allowed on it, you see. So we've always done things slightly in a different way. It's more subversive. And we decided we're going to pool our resources as we always have. We make this period a time as almost like a residency. So we get together every week, we check in on each other, and we start practicing on each other in terms of whether is it new ideas that we want to try, new workshops that we want to run, new plays, we have a puppeteer, we have a playwright. So we're just testing material on each other. And because, the space is already designed in a way where everyone's different and we support each other, and we're also open enough to tell each other that, oh, that doesn't work. Right? We have Kevin, who he goes to all my workshops with me. He's a fantastic facilitator, and he's very brutal. He would literally watch something and go like, boring. Or he'll go to, because that's just the way he works. Kevin lives with Down syndrome. So, all of us in Access Path, we're like, okay, we want to know the truth. We ask Kevin. He's going to tell you, is it good? Is it not good? Is he interested or not? And so we decided to take this point, and of course, we also created this environment of allyship. So the people that we do work with, before we even jump into a project together, it has to be made very clear how our artists, our visions as creators need to be supported. So we always bang on about parity, not charity. And our allies know that. They know that we don't want pity, we don't want handouts. We want equitable opportunities. That whole, I saw a visual recently, it's about this apple tree that was slanted, and then it talks about privilege. So equality is, they're given the same ladder, but the tree slanted, the system is slanted, you know what I mean? And then the person that is closer to the tree will get it. So, this idea of equity is maybe the other person gets another ladder, but if the tree is still slanted, no matter how high the ladder is, he or she's not going to get to the apples, right? And social justice is when, there's a paradigm shift, that tree gets corrected. They prop him up in a bit. So everybody gets the same ladder or equitable ladders, and the tree's straight, and we can all get to the apples. So we always go back to this idea of the more we learn, the more we don't know. And I think now's that time to recharge, to reprioritize, and to share resources.
Indeed, indeed. Really nicely said, Grace. Okay, we can continue the same question for Leland and then Shou, and then after that, Sneha has a question. So, Leland?
Yeah. Malcolm, the question again was silver lining, is that correct?
Yeah, like things that you have found while creating from home.
Yeah, yeah. So for me, definitely yes. I think like Ammar and Grace, I do work a lot from home, so that hasn't been that much of a shift. But I think just responding to what's happening around us and these big upheavals and these big changes has definitely shifted me as a person and as an artist. And I think responding to those shifts and those stories, I think is for me, I feel is important and it's good. I'm someone that is very resistant to change. I don't do very well with change, and I'm quite stubborn. So, and I think now I feel it's not the time to go against the tide because there's nothing I can do to change the way things are as well. And I think not having that resistance and accepting a lot of the things that are happening, as painful as some of it is, has also, like I mentioned earlier, brought out new ideas and new perspectives, which I think is good. So I would say really, for me, it's to be embracing those changes and allowing those changes to be expressed creatively. I also feel, and I had a conversation with my husband about this, who's an artist, and he felt that having these limits now would actually force, like I can't speak for him, but would at least force me um, to challenge myself in ways that I think I hadn't before, because I worked maybe in a certain way for several years. And like I said, I'm not resistant to evolving, but I'm resistant to certain ways of doing things. Like I mentioned earlier, like maybe the methods I work with actors. And so I think those limits have been helpful also. And making me rethink my approach to my work and the stories that I want to try to tell. And I thought Chen brought up a very important point, which was that because there aren't at hand right now, at least for me, any projects that I can see to fruition, which I've been working, like towing that productivity project line for a couple of years. Suddenly you realize that writing for, really having that examination to ask yourself, what is it that I want to say, and how, what fires me up, and again, accepting the limitations and the situation that we're in right now and responding to everything that's happening. And I think having that time to really say, you know what, I'm writing now and I'm creating now because I have to, because that's just part of who I am. And again, coming from a privileged position to be able to do that. And I think having that sense of play, that time for yourself, to really think and reflect about the work that you want to do, your voice that you want to build, I think is it's going to be it's so important and it's so rewarding. I think, yeah, that's about it for me for now.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Leland. Yeah, and Shou, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. I mean, I think to look for the silver lining in everything is the right thing to do, and it is the optimistic thing to do. But I don't know if I know what that is. I try to find it, but I think there's so many unknowns about the pandemic that it's a bit difficult to say that this is going to be today's silver lining is tomorrow's silver lining. So I've been kind of taking it day by day in a way, because also my silver lining may not be someone else's silver lining. So I'm also very cognizant of coming on to this to share what I think is positive, because I mean, I have a house um, over my head. I can eat still. I don't have work coming in, but for now, I'm all right. But I mean, I know there are a lot of artists out there where this is going to be a bread and butter issue, and all the systems that were meant to help that, or the self-employed, is becoming really quite difficult to navigate. So as I love Gray's metaphor about how that tree needs to be corrected, and I think that's the silver lining for me. I think we're becoming a lot more aware of the failures, and I'm using this word very precisely, the failures of the systems that we've been in. I mean, we have to KPI it. We have to show that this is working. This amount of shows that we've done. This is the amount of actors we've hired. These are the number of money given out. But at the end of the day, I think to be here at this point, where the idea of arts being essential is being questioned, shows there's a certain failure in there. And there are also a lot of failures in the way that we've not been able to be inclusive. And I think one of the great things about this medium, it does democratize access to that. I love what Ammar said about how you can watch all these great recordings of shows. I'm not saying plays, recording of shows, because that's great. You get to learn, you get to see, and and we get to see things that otherwise would have cost you thousands of dollars to watch. Like Andrew Lloyd Webber's blockbuster Phantom of the Opera would have cost at least £100 just to sit on the back, not including the flight there. But it was so well done, and this was one way to introduce people to musical theater, which was my introduction to musical theater. And then there's all these different like weird shit that would never be brought to Singapore that's being broadcast as well, which I think is great, because if it is made accessible, if there is enough of an explanation of it, it actually democratizes that information. And I think that's the silver lining here. I also really have been enjoying connecting with all sorts of different people. That's, you know, because spatial theory is such that if the more you congregate in a certain area, the more likely you're going to see the same kinds of people. And that's very true. Whenever I'm backstage, it's a closed door. Right? Whenever you try to get into audition room, you can't, because it's a closed door. So people who have not had access to those spaces that I've been in, I'm just simply cut off from as well. So I really like being able to pop into, for example, town halls and just show face to producers that have never seen me before, or connecting with people like Ammar and having great conversations with Grace about this. I think that's what I really enjoy. And I want to share one thing that I've been reading that kind of helps to scaffold, because I think scaffolding is a very like Singaporean thing. You want to learn something, right? So I think a great book that I find a lot of inspiration for is Twyla Tharp's book called The Creative Habit. Twyla Tharp is a great contemporary American dancer, and she pretty much breaks down her process of creativity in very bite-sized and very self-led reflections and inflections as well. So I highly recommend that as a means to just look a bit more inside. I'm still working through some of them, because those questions are very honest, and it really can help us kind of figure out how do we continue to make sense and produce eventually something that we feel honest about. That's my thought.
Thank you so much, you guys, for just like engaging with that with so much depth and with your personal experiences as well. You guys have been incredibly open about like your emotions and your feelings throughout this period, and I think we all really appreciate that. And also, like, I personally resonated with a lot of what you said, especially about Shou and what you said about the silver lining. Often it is hard to kind of like quantify that in this time, and also what maybe the silver lining today is not what it is tomorrow. I think that was something that really like hit me in the face, because just a simple question as to how are you doing has become so difficult to answer, that I was completely fine yesterday, but today I'm like not doing well, and then tomorrow I'm doing well again. So how did the week go? Like much less, how has this entire circuit breaker period been going? Yeah, and I also really like what like you talked about, Grace, about accessibility and how like this idea of parity and not charity. I think I'm gonna quote you on that one. I really like that, and how this circuit breaker period has kind of like revealed a lot about that. So actually, this question is directed to Ammar, if that's okay. I just wanted to ask you about this idea of parody, not charity, and how like as a choreographer or filmmaker, maybe like I'm curious as to how the arts has given you a platform to actualize this in your own experience, and maybe you could tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think that line from Grace really reflected a lot on my work, because that's actually what I like to show on my work, whether it's a dance performing art or whether it's a video. I think it's very important that I perform not for the sake of, to look pitiful, or like, you know, or to look like a circus freak, because like people tend to have this perspective, like they will say, oh, this guy can can dance, but he cannot hear. Look at that, how amazing is that? And that's when people look at the disability first and then talent second. So in my work line, I usually like try to portray myself as the talent first and then the disability, because many of them people overlook that, and it's a very sad thing. Like, you know, I believe that disability people who are in the art industry, we have to work twice hard as other people, because we have certain barriers. Like for me, I cannot hear music, and I need more time with the music to familiarize myself. And often it's very daunting, because like people tend to dismiss us off, like, oh, he's just performing because it's like a charity show. You know, they want to be contribute to the society. I think people forget that beside contributing to the society, we are also showing what we are passionate about. You know, yeah, and this is really something that's very deep for me and very meaningful, to showcase that, you know, we have the passion and we want to show our talent first, not our disability.
I love that. Thank you. Oops, sorry. Yeah, I love that what you said about talent first and like disability second, and how people tend to like swap that. Thank you for sharing that with us. This actually reminds me about like the whole idea of like applied theater, and how your time with Access Path has kind of like, how has that journey been for you so far, and how has that um, shifted your perceptions in any way about how you look at the arts, or how you look at what you do or your passion?
Okay, so I'm sure most of you have seen the movie called The Greatest Show on Earth. Yeah, so it's somehow I kind of put Access Path Production into that same. We are a bunch of, you know, great individual with disability coming together just to perform one great show, and it's not just for the people, but it's also for us. And in the movie, you can actually see like some of them are being demoralized. They are ashamed, maybe they are afraid to show of what they are. And at the end of the day, they shine out and it became the greatest show on earth. And I think that's what Access Path has helped me to be to be to empower myself and to empower my friends in the Access Path. So he has given me a platform, where an opportunity for me to shine, where um, like in most cases, often people like artists like us, we don't have access to certain shows or access to a certain play. and also sometimes we don't know where to start, and that's where access path came.
Thank you, Ammar. This also makes me reflect on how, as a theater major myself, I've had a lot of questions about how theater or the arts in general can be used in a meaningful way to kind of really make a change in people's lives. And Grace, I wanted to ask you about like your advice to people who are looking into applied theater or companies that have been putting this in practice for a while. What is your advice to them and how you can go? Because you clearly have a passion in this area. So I was wondering if you had any words of wisdom.
So I teach applied theatre at NAFA as well, and that was something that I guess I realize there's no one way to do it. It is an umbrella term, right? And I see it as, in this case with Access Path, it's about bridging that gap between mainstream understanding of what disability arts and disability talent looks like. And it's a reflection of current charity-based practices that are in Singapore, which sometimes can be very, it's full of, you get one spectrum where it's to evoke pity, to ask for handouts. And then on the other spectrum, it's about inspiration porn, it's a superhuman. And if this person can be a Paralympian, what is your excuse? So you get that whole spectrum of what the perception of disability, as Ammar has said. So it's a very complicated conversation and process indeed to use theatre, in this case, that's my art form, and open up the space of this conversation. And of course, it's what we work, we don't work top down in a way. So I think often the mindset in Singapore is, where's the 10-year series where we give me the manual and I'll try to follow it to a T. No, in this case, you're always in a space of flux, fluidity, and that's where your mettle as a theater practitioner with social justice at your core, right? And ethics, that you're not here to exploit stories and voices to beef up your resume, to advance yourself, your artistic practice in a certain way where you're exploiting stories from other people in places of marginalization. So I think it always goes back to the ethics. And I have this tribe at Access Path where I don't do it by myself. If I have an idea, I run it with Ammar, I run it with Daniel, I run it with, Natalie, Kaven, all of them. And they keep me in check. Sometimes you do, you're so focused on a certain kind of impact, a certain kind of KPI or outcome, but what is the process? So I have a team here who we're all in sync. We all know what is it that we want to say with Access Path, and we focus on the process, because when you have a healthy, ethical process in applied theatre, the performance, the product, or what you call it, it takes care of itself. Yeah, and when I remember when we spent 2 years of our lives doing, and Suddenly I Disappear, it's an international collaboration with UK disability-led artists, and we had school groups coming in, and we wanted to make sure that the audience was as diverse as it could be. So we had bureaucrats coming in, we had people in the social sector coming in, just to listen to these voices of across the spectrum of lived disabled experience. And often at the end of the day, people will applaud and then they'll leave, right? At the end of every show, it's always silence, because people went in there expecting sob stories or angry ranting voices. And so, but our work was actually a reflective, performative intervention that invites people into the space. It's about a discourse about diversity. It's way more complex than sob stories or inspirational tales. And we have very young people who would then go home, and after that they would write to us because they needed time to process what they've just gone through. So as an applied theatre practitioner, I feel like I am a work in progress, and the world changes, And with my skill set, I need to change as well and see where I'm needed and only go where I'm invited as well.
Thank you, Grace. Yeah, the focus on process is really something that I take away from that your answer. That I mean, it's always a fine line between doing work that's meaningful and doing work that's self-serving. And I think that focus on process is something that was a good reminder to myself as well. So thank you for that. I think right now, like I would actually want to just segue real quick into Leland's short film that she's been working on over this circuit breaker, and I think it's very relevant to a lot of how we all feel. So when she sent it to us a couple of days ago, Malcolm and I watched it together, and at the end, it's a really short 2-minute film that we're going to be showing right now. But if I could just share like real quick, after the film was over, we just looked at each other like via Zoom, and we just went, that just completely summed up how we were feeling at that very instant. So it's brilliant. Maybe Malcolm, I'm gonna pass on the time to you to just like do your tech thing.
Okay, so I'll be sharing the video right now that Lillian actually sent us, and it's on Vimeo. And Lillian, I'd like to ask, maybe after we show your video, you could possibly share a little bit about your inspiration, or a little bit about how the process was like when you were creating the video. So I'll be sharing that right now, and I hope all you could hear it. Okay. Is everyone able to see my screen? Yes? Okay, great.
Man. Man.
Man.
Man. Yo, chill out, man. Chill out.
Man. Oh, man.
Man.
Man. Man.
Sunset. Sundown, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. Party. After party, man. Oh.
No, man.
Oh.
Man.
Hey. Man.
And man.
Man.
323 to 584.
Man.
Adam Young, 19. Okay.
Man.
Okay, and that was a very nice short film by Leland. Really nice, really great. I especially love the last part in space, because, well, we all know that the SpaceX thing just docked in the space station, so that was quite cool. But Leland, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about how this came about, and what was your inspiration?
Sure. So I'm judging a competition for MM2. that they're having, and the deadline is, I think, like in 2 weeks. And they asked the judges, and they said, "Can y'all make a short film?" But there's no obligation, you know. And at that time, I was doing a couple of proposals, and I was thinking, you know, like of doing something. Then I tossed some ideas with my husband, um, and then, like I mentioned, on May 4th, Star Wars Day, I was supposed to be exercising and doing something responsible with my nieces, and we ended up spending 1 hour trying to fit the three of us into the Millennium Falcon. And that kind of got me thinking about the idea of escaping, and also finding that perfect Zoom background. And that kind of sparked the genesis of the story. And I thought, wouldn't that be fun to have these two friends? And I knew I wanted very little dialogue. And in fact, I originally was thinking that it would have no dialogue at all. And then I thought, and then obviously I've been reflecting on like everything that's going on in humanity at large. And so the title "Oh Man" came to me first as just like a colloquial phrase, and I think a phrase that a lot of women use to. And I wanted to play on the slacker genre, you know, like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. You guys are too young to know that. Your time would be Harold and Kumar goes to White Castle, right? And I wanted to play off this, you know, these two particular types of guys, and them becoming very reflective at the end about what, you know, about their lives, and what the world and humanity means to them. So I thought, okay, I'll just use that word "oh man." And then, like I said, I'm a very actor-based director. And I knew that because I didn't have any resources, and I knew that I obviously wanted a good actor and someone that I felt that was also a friend. And that's when Shou and Andrew came into the picture. Shai is a very old friend who has acted for me and my husband before, and Andrew and I have also worked together and we're friends. And so I approached both of them, not knowing that they were also friends. And then I asked them to give me their favorite destinations, like where are their favorite places in the world. So like, you know, West Papua, Brazil, you know, Morocco, and, you know, Croatia, Ibiza for Andrew. So all the locations, I chose the pictures from a copyright-free site, but all the locations were locations that the actors love, that you know, like the Andrew and Shaifu, they were their favorite places in the world. So I just told them, just give me your top 5 favorite places. And then actually the rehearsal process was a bit long because it was, you know, we had to rehearse over Zoom, and I recorded a few, we recorded a few passes, and then I went back and I looked at the passes, and I emailed the actors and I told them what was working for me, what I felt could be better. And basically we crafted it, and the film that you guys have seen was like the eighth run through that we had. And then I also got them to re-record some audio takes on their mobile phone because the audio on Zoom isn't great. Then my friend who's a sound designer, Xander, he remixed the audio, and then he created the background sound of all the different worlds that the actors wanted to be in. So that's how it happened. And yeah, so the idea came about quite quickly, but the whole process felt like a proper film shoot because there were like, you know, some major rehearsals, and then we did a couple of takes, and it still went to audio post. And then we still did some visual effects where we also brightened Shaifu's, you know, because he didn't have, he just had light on him from the window of his room. So there were still some things that we did that felt like the process of a short film. But I was, I must say that it was extremely fun to do, and it was, you know, it just felt so good to be able to work with actors, like to work with Shaifu and Andrew. And even though it was on Zoom and I couldn't see them, it was incredibly fun. Yeah.
That's really nice to hear. I think yeah, I think all of us are actually kind of craving the whole being able to work together and to bounce ideas off
Yeah,
each other. I think as creatives, we're very much dependent on that. The whole
yeah.
idea of community, and I really like how you were mentioning that even Andrew and Shaifu were involved creatively in the process.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Okay, so we're gonna go to a question for Shou Chen, and after that, we're going to have a few last closing questions. And of course, for all our friends on Facebook who are watching right now, do leave any comments or questions if you like, and we will take them at the end as well. Um, so this next question is for Shou Chen, and Shou Chen, as a theatre maker, you've created work both in acting and directing. Um, I think that you've written in your artist bio that your artistic inspiration stems from your interest in the encounters between cultures across time and space. And we all know that the pandemic right now has divided and united the world at the same time. And given that COVID-19 has given us a sense of solidarity and unity, also at the same time exposing all the failures in our apple tree and our society. Um, you know, has this inspired you in any way, and has it urged you to think of things differently in your approach to theater making? And what does that mean for like works that will come after COVID-19?
I think that's a great question. And um, I don't know if I can answer that with a clear answer, because as I said, as I shared before, I think it's very privileged to jump to say this is what I'm going to do, right? Because that response assumes that you have the means and the resources to mount that vision, to fight against the world so that you can throw money at it and things happen the way you want to. So but I know within the core of me that this is something that will have an impact on the way that we create work, the way that we relate to each other. I mean, there was an article that I read that we're all having nightmares, literally like dreaming a lot more than usual. Like, can you imagine the kind of psyche that this lockdown across the world has on not just adults but also children? My own niece had to stay over here with us away from the parents because of the directive that the government has put. So we cannot underestimate that impact on it. Um, so which kind of got me to think also, and I think one of the now beautiful things about having to be at home all these past 2 months is that I actually get a sense of the rhythm of life that is around me. Like when the birds are going to start chirping, and there's a rooster that walks down the street every morning and every day around this time. So if you hear a rooster happening, that rooster is taking a stroll. I don't know where he comes from, but that's his rhythm. Birds are still chirping out there. Decay is still happening. Life is still being born. There's all these rhythms that is happening around us. And I think that's extremely beautiful, because that's also happening across the world. And the fact that this setup here, this streaming thing, and the fact that also the broadcast is 30 seconds, I believe, before it goes live, it's kind of trippy if you think about it. What is my reality right now is actually 30 seconds before your reality, whoever is reading or listening to us right now. And I think that is so pregnant with thought and information, and that's the idea of traversing time and space. And I think what's really what I'm kind of rolling around in my mind at the moment is that, because tomorrow is the end of circuit breaker, right? What new does this new level of anxiety is like, do I know how to talk to people? What is happening outside of my room? What is happening outside of my house? What is happening outside of my neighborhood? What is happening outside of Singapore? I think that to me is what I want to ask, and I would like to tap into and to connect with my friends overseas, and not just feel like I am in this room. Because I think that's the danger about what has happened to us, is that we forget actually how big and infinite world and time is. And I love the last image that Leland has in that video, because what is this one small speck of virus in this huge infinite continuum of life and space? And I think that's meaningful to me, and I think that's a great place that I would like to start in trying to make sense of this in my art.
Nicely said. I think I really agree with you when it comes to how connected everything is. You know, the whole idea that our realities are all different, but yet we're still coexisting in this one earth and one sphere. You know, that's really, really powerful. It's nice that you brought up the idea of circuit breaker being lifted tomorrow, because I think all of us are a little bit like, what's going to happen? Which brings us to the final question that we have, which is actually to all four of our panelists, which is, now that things are reopening slowly in phases, of course, certain things can continue before others. What does this mean for artists who are going forward? Is it kind of the same where we're just going to have to continue with online workshops and find more things to do online, or is there something more that we haven't tapped into and we haven't like thought out of the box enough yet?
Also, if I could just jump in real quick and add on to that question, just to think about, like, I was curious as to what is the content, like, what do you think is the kind of content that's going to be produced? You know, like, I'm also just adding this on since we have like all four of you is going to speak, and if you just, in case you needed some more things to think about, like, what kind of content do you think would be almost like this pandemic inspired art, like now that we're moving into this like post pandemic, well, I wouldn't call it post, but more like post circuit breaker at least period?
All right. I think I will just keep it very, very, very short. I think the answer to all this question is, man. Yeah, that's all.
It's all up to us, right, man? Where are you gonna go from here, man? Humans. For me and my artists, we are very clear. There is a community that we want to serve. There's a community that we want to deepen our relationships with them, listen to their stories, excavate more of their stories, so that, you know, we can share that with the mainstream audience, and also profile more disability role models. And while this whole pandemic is happening, of course, on our side, not that I say that we're not on the productivity train, but we are productive. Because we are selectively productive, because we're very clear of our goals is just to serve the community. So what goes on for us in terms of whether is it an audio description project that we have with the Asian Civilization Museum to audio describe the tank shipwreck and their artifacts, but to do it in the form of a radio play. So that can actually be done remotely. And how do we do it in a way where, when it's put online, both a non-disabled audience, a non-vision impaired audience, and a vision impaired audience can both participate in this radio play audio tour kind of creative endeavor. So we're very, very clear with our artistic vision and also the ways that we will achieve that. So we're going to press on with that, as always.
Yeah. So I really like what Grace said about radio plays, and I think that when I was growing up, radio plays was very big. And I don't personally listen to a lot of podcasts, but my husband does, and I know a lot of friends who do, and I feel that just using that as an example, I think because of the way things are, and we don't know, like Chen said, we don't know, there are changes happening day to day, right? And I think it's to adapt, but also to embrace different ways in which we can tell our stories, because we can't stop being creative and telling our stories, because that's just who we are. That's part of our fabric of existence, and to find different ways and to adjust and not fight against the tide, because the tide is huge right now. This is like a tsunami coming at us, right? So is to how to work with that, and and just to find ways to remain creative, and to use this opportunity to really ask ourselves, respond to what's going on, and to challenge ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to kind of tackle that question with kind of two levels of thinking. One is kind of the industry level, because I think when the arts starts to open up again, the audience-facing industries, it's going to take a long time before anything recovers. So the bleeding that is happening, there will be a time where resources and that buffer will run out, right? So that's why a lot of us are scrambling just to pivot ourselves or to position ourselves and put out the productivity porn, because that's our CV during this time, right? Who's gonna fund you for your creativity? No, we're gonna do that. So that's the reality of the industry out there, right? This is the reality of which we're creating art, creating culture in Singapore. So I would say that I would like, for myself, and maybe to encourage my fellow artists, to think about ways in which we can re-visualize, dream again about what the industry could look like, to be more inclusive, to be more kind to each other, especially when things are difficult, because how many people is going to have a laptop that's able to support like high res webinars, or be able to subscribe to a Zoom? So these things is not taken for granted as much as it is accessible. So I think we all have a part to play to make the world after this a better place. And it's very difficult considering how much structure that is and how systematic a lot of things is. But I take a lot of advice and hope from Ong Kian Sing's recent lecture about curating no thing, about actually art can actually happen within little pockets of democracy where creativity happens. That's where a sense of freedom, a sense of meaning can happen. And so while we may not be able to see a paying audience in a while or in the flesh, how can we continue to support the idea and the value of art making in Singapore? So in terms of personal stories, I think there's a lot to be excavated about the stories that come out during these 2 months, because oh my god, have you heard of all the dramatic stories that have been happening? And some of it's actually really funny as well. And I'm really hoping Dwayne Lau, Audrey Low, shout out again, make us laugh, right? So I think there's tragedy and comedy are very close to each other. Just to quote Christina Sargent, the late Christina Sargent, they're so close to each other because they help us make sense of who we are. And whether or not whatever comes out of this period, I think what I would like is to be able to laugh at ourselves and some of the ridiculousness that has happened, but it's also as if we can make sense of how do we move forward from this. And we don't have to say, oh, that was a terrible time. And we certainly cannot allow the propaganda machine to define only one narrative for us. And I think that's where the possibility of excavating of all these different stories, and I hope I can keep myself to that challenge as well.
It's really nicely said, Chen. Nice shout out to Dwayne Lau, because he actually dropped a comment and he said, "Don't worry, you are funny." Well, paraphrased, of course. And actually, in the interest of time, we're going to be taking one question from one of our viewers on Facebook. And perhaps maybe one of you on the panel could take this and answer it. It's a little bit of a two-part question. So, in times of COVID-19, certain groups in our society are disproportionately affected. And how do you think the arts and communities can be supported by other spheres in a way that authenticity is retained without exploitation? And how can we focus on surviving and addressing the failures of this society and system that we are in simultaneously? This question actually comes from Samuel Sim, and yeah, it'll be open to anyone who's would like to take it.
I like this quote that one of my mentors, Kate O'Reilly, always shared, that opportunity favors the prepared mind. And I don't think anyone I know in this time, whether within the arts sector or beyond that, is most of them I know they're not squandering their time, whether is it to heal, to recover, to recharge, or whether is it to find new ways of working or learning and supporting each other. And I think I read somewhere where, I think one of my favorite writers, Arundhati Roy, who said that the pandemic is a portal. So we have to walk through this portal and we have to come out of it on the other end. And it's a chance for us to decide what kind of world we want to see when this whole thing is, comes to hopefully a natural death. So I think for us, it's, if there are whispers of what's not right, of unfair practices, bad practices, of a lack of care, whether it's in the professional settings, unsavory practices, and the gaps that need to be filled and has been spotlighted in this time, I think we need to look at that action. And if we don't have the resources or the energy for that, we need to open it out and gather and crowdsource. So I work with communities all the time. So I am a big fan of crowdsourcing. And resources doesn't just mean money, doesn't just mean time and effort. It can be either one of those or stories or beyond. So I think we need to be a little bit more open in our approach towards problem solving, that you don't have to have all the answers. And often, sometimes as artists, we take on the pressure that we need to offer some sort of resolution in our work. But sometimes I feel like we're here to question, we're here to provoke. And there is value and merit in there. And we can keep asking those questions so that people, when it's call and response, right? So when people listen and people take note of it, and that is when something grows. So, I will be the first one to say that I don't have a lot of answers, but I do have questions, and I would always open this up to everybody that I encounter and, see what we can do together.
If I can jump in here, Malcolm, I think it's the great question that Samuel has asked, because there are some real bread and butter needs that are happening out there. Yeah. And Grace, I love how you're talking about questioning things, but I was also thinking about what are the little ways that I can do to help, right? One of the things a group of my friends did, not quite initiated by I can't remember who initiated it, but essentially there's this practice during the olden times where a group of aunties on the same floor or the same kampong will like pull together money, and then they would do lottery kind of thing. And then
the tontine, is it?
Yeah. Okay, so this was the initial part where it's like, okay, let's just pull a bunch of money together and then do that. So what I really appreciated about it was that I think it has to begin there, because I think in Singapore we've gotten very comfortable with things being solved from the top down. Yes. And yes, we expect that because this is a democracy, and we are trying to figure out ways to get the world better, to get our society better, right? So there is a certain responsibility coming from the top, but I truly believe there should also be a responsibility coming from from the grassroots. And it doesn't have to be a concerted effort, or you don't have to be registered business or create a Facebook page for it. I think it really begins with a small group of people just to see how you can help out each other and say, okay, well, this month you're kind of not great. Can I buy you maybe a sack of potatoes? I mean, it sounds terrible, but can you imagine what you can do with a sack of potatoes over a course of like a week? That's a lot of meals, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I mean, we're not talking about like Starbucks coffee here. We're not talking about helping you find a job, because yes, all that is going to be happening, but it will take time. But I think these little aids, like for example, saying, okay, you need to do this recording, maybe I can loan you my camera, or I can loan you my thing. I'll put it outside your door so I don't touch you or anything. I'll make sure you sanitize everyone else. Kind of little things that is happening. People have been sending food to each other, which I love. I really appreciate all the little food that I've been getting. And I think it really does begin with a small group of people saying, okay, here's a problem. This is something that we understand within ourselves that we need to solve. Let's try to fill the gap.
Yeah, and that's the collective duty of care that I'm talking about, right? And we don't need to make a big fuss out of that. And it also allows people the space to go like, hey, I need help, right? And to not be afraid and not associate that with guilt, to be able to ask for, I need this or I need that. And someone goes like, oh, I have this, here you go. There's no need to make a big fuss or show out of that. And we, in a way, then we are preparing ourselves. We're preparing ourselves collectively, because the world's always gonna change. And we know that, as the world changes, we are prepared in a way that we have each other's backs. So I think it's as simple as that.
I think it's almost the same as like kampung spirit, as we locals call it, kampung spirit.
Very nicely said, y'all. Thank you all so much for the nice inputs. And so I'll be wrapping up over here right now. To all our viewers, thank you all so much for joining us here today. And a very big thank you to the 4 panelists that we've had. So everyone who's watching, remember to continue and look out for each other, support one another, continue and question and provoke and find the answers that you're looking for. And always look to improve the system, because that's what we are here for as artists. So thank you all once again for joining Made in SG today. And I believe before I end, Sneha has some words to say. Yeah.
Yes, I also just want to thank everyone once again for joining us, both viewers as well as the panelists, and also big thank you to Felicia for helping us with the live captioning. You've done a brilliant job this entire time. I don't know how you kept up, but you did. Big shout out to you. Yeah, I also just wanted to end real quick by saying that stay tuned to our Facebook page, our website, and our Instagram page, all our social medias, because we will be creating more of these contents and having more of these conversation for the next few weeks, as we are, I'm still under lockdown and things are starting to ease up. We would love to constantly, be in touch with you and engage you with all the questions that you might have. And if you have more questions after this panel, feel free to keep it going in the comment section and we will still reply to them. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. All right. Everyone say goodbye. Bye.